My name is King Williams, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I would be sleeping in my truck after 40 years of owning my own home. 3 months ago, my only daughter Amanda lost her battle with cancer. Instead of supporting each other through grief, my son-in-law Walter threw me out onto the street like garbage, calling me a useless old man. I begged him to let me stay, even just in the garage, but he refused. Little did he know, the next day he would receive an envelope that would change everything. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you believe karma always finds its way back. Portland, Oregon has been my home for over 45 years. I moved here as a young man with dreams of building a good life, and that is exactly what I did. Construction became my trade, my passion, and my livelihood. I worked with these hands day in and day out, through rain and shine, building homes for other families while saving every penny to create one for my own. In 1978, I purchased a small plot of land in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Portland. It was nothing special to most people, just a rectangular piece of earth with some patchy grass and a few maple trees. But to me, it represented everything I had worked for. With the help of a few buddies from the construction site and countless weekends of labor, I built our 3-bedroom house from the ground up. Every nail, every board, every shingle on that roof was placed by these hands. When I finally carried my wife Sophia through the front door of our completed home, I felt like the richest man alive. We were young and in love, with our whole future ahead of us. Sophia worked as a school librarian, spreading her love of books to generations of children. I continued in construction, eventually becoming a foreman. We spent our evenings planning our future family, painting rooms, and creating a home filled with laughter and dreams. In 1985, our greatest blessing arrived. Amanda came into this world on a sunny April morning, all 7 pounds 4 ounces of perfection with her mother's blue eyes and my stubborn chin. From the moment I held her, I knew I would do anything to protect this tiny miracle. Sophia and I poured all our love into raising her, watching with pride as she grew into a kind, intelligent, and determined young woman. Life threw us our first real curveball when Amanda was 16. Sophia had been feeling tired for months, brushing it off as working too hard. By the time she finally saw a doctor, the heart failure was advanced. We lost her just 3 weeks after the diagnosis. Amanda and I were devastated, clinging to each other through the darkest days of our lives. I would sit on the edge of her bed, night after night, as she cried herself to sleep, promising that somehow we would find our way forward together. And we did. Though the house felt emptier without Sophia's laughter, Amanda and I formed an unbreakable bond. I watched with immense pride as she channeled her grief into purpose, deciding to become a nurse. Her explanation was simple and touched my heart. I couldn't save Mom, but I can help save others. She worked incredibly hard, earning scholarships and graduating with honors. Every time she came home from nursing school with stories of patients she had helped, I saw Sophia's compassion living on through our daughter. Amanda specialized in oncology nursing, working with cancer patients at Portland Memorial Hospital. Her patients adored her for her gentle touch and unwavering optimism. Fellow nurses often told me how she would stay after her shift to sit with patients who had no family, or how she remembered the names of every family member of every patient in her care. That was my Amanda, heart bigger than the Oregon sky. It was at the hospital in 2015 that she met Walter Lewis. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative who visited the oncology floor regularly. Tall, well-dressed, and armed with a dazzling smile, Walter caught Amanda's attention immediately. When she first brought him home for dinner, I was impressed by his charm and ambition. He spoke eloquently about his career goals, asked thoughtful questions about my construction days, and seemed genuinely interested in our family photos and stories. "Your daughter is the most compassionate person I have ever met, Mr. Williams," he told me that night as Amanda cleared the dishes. "I have never known anyone who cares so deeply for others." I appreciated his recognition of what made Amanda special. Over the next few years, I watched their relationship develop. Walter seemed to bring back a lightness to Amanda that had been missing since we lost Sophia. He took her on weekend trips to the coast, surprised her with tickets to her favorite bands, and appeared to support her demanding nursing schedule. When he proposed in 2017, Amanda called me immediately, her voice bubbling with excitement. Their wedding in 2018 was a small but beautiful affair in the backyard of our home. I will never forget the pride and bittersweet joy I felt walking Amanda down the aisle we created between rows of white chairs on the lawn where she had once played as a child. In my father of the bride speech, my voice cracked as I talked about how Sophia would have loved to see this day and how proud we both were of the woman Amanda had become. "Walter," I said, raising my glass, "you are gaining not just a wife today, but a partner with a heart of gold. Take care of each other. Build a life filled with love, and know that this home will always be here for both of you." Little did I know then how those words would come back to haunt me. A few months after the wedding, Walter suggested that he and Amanda move in with me. He presented it as concern for my welfare, pointing out that at 61, I might appreciate having them around as I aged. The idea of having Amanda back home, of hearing her laughter in the hallways again, was incredibly appealing. Besides, Walter explained, they could save money for their own place while helping me maintain the house. "We could convert Sophia's old home office into our bedroom," Amanda suggested. "That way we all have our privacy, but can still be together." The arrangement worked well initially. Our home felt alive again with their presence. We shared meals several times a week, talking about our days and making plans for the future. On weekends, Walter would sometimes help me with yard work, asking questions about the best way to prune the apple trees Sophia and I had planted decades ago. Amanda spoke hopefully of starting a family soon, and I found myself daydreaming about grandchildren playing in the same yard where their mother had once ridden her first bicycle. Then came January 2023, and the diagnosis that shattered our world. Amanda had been experiencing stomach pain and fatigue for weeks, but attributed it to her demanding work schedule. When she finally saw a doctor, the news was devastating. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The same disease she had helped so many patients fight was now attacking her own body. The prognosis was grim, with doctors giving her less than a year. I immediately withdrew $162,000 from my retirement savings, every penny I had set aside, to fund experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Walter agreed it was the right move, promising we would do everything possible to save Amanda. I took a leave from my part-time consulting work to care for her, cooking meals that might tempt her diminishing appetite, driving her to endless appointments, and researching alternative therapies late into the night. As Amanda grew weaker, I took over all the household responsibilities. Walter seemed overwhelmed by his wife's illness, spending increasingly long hours at work. When he was home, he appeared distracted and uncomfortable, with Amanda's changing appearance as the cancer and treatments took their toll. I tried not to judge him too harshly, remembering how difficult it had been for me to watch Sophia slip away years earlier. One night, as Amanda slept fitfully in the hospital after a particularly rough round of treatment, I whispered to her about the promise I had made to Sophia when she was dying. "I promised your mother I would keep our home in the family," I told Amanda, gently holding her thin hand, "that I would make sure it would always be there for you, and someday for your children, a place filled with love and memories." Amanda squeezed my hand weakly. "I know, Dad. This house means everything to us." Despite every effort and treatment, Amanda declined rapidly. By October, the doctors advised us to focus on making her comfortable rather than continuing with the increasingly painful treatments. I moved a recliner next to her bed, sleeping there night after night so she would never wake up alone. Walter visited daily but rarely stayed long, claiming the sight of her suffering was too difficult to bear. In the early hours of a Sunday morning, with me holding her hand and telling her stories about her mother, Amanda took her last breath. She was just 38 years old, the same age Sophia had been when we built our home together. As I sat there, my child gone before me in the house I had built with my own hands, I felt a part of my soul had been ripped away. Amanda's funeral was held at the same church where we had said goodbye to Sophia 22 years earlier. Walter appeared appropriately grief-stricken, accepting condolences and staying close to my side throughout the service. Friends from the hospital shared beautiful stories about Amanda's impact on her patients and colleagues. I could barely speak, managing only to thank everyone for coming before emotion overwhelmed me. The days following the funeral passed in a blur of numbness. I moved through the house like a ghost, touching Amanda's things, sitting in her favorite reading spot by the living room window, trying to process that she was truly gone. Walter returned to work almost immediately, explaining that staying busy was his way of coping. I noticed he began coming home later and later, sometimes smelling of alcohol. About 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a notice that the mortgage payment was overdue. This confused me, as Walter had taken over the financial responsibilities when Amanda became ill, insisting it was one less thing for me to worry about. When I questioned him, he brushed it off. "Just an oversight with everything going on," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I will take care of it tomorrow." But the next day, another notice arrived. Concerned, I checked the bank account Amanda and I had used for household expenses, which Walter now had access to. The balance was much lower than it should have been, with several large withdrawals I could not account for. Using the last of my accessible savings, I paid the mortgage myself, not wanting to risk losing the home I had promised both Sophia and Amanda I would protect. 2 weeks after Amanda's funeral, Walter began inviting friends over for gatherings that lasted late into the night. The first time, I said nothing, thinking perhaps he needed the support. But as these gatherings became more frequent and louder, with music blaring and laughter echoing through the halls where my daughter had so recently suffered, I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. One morning, I came downstairs to find empty liquor bottles scattered across the living room, cigarette burns on the coffee table I had crafted by hand as a wedding gift for Sophia, and food stains on the carpet. When Walter finally emerged from his room around noon, I attempted to broach the subject gently. "Walter, I understand you are grieving in your own way," I began. "But perhaps we could be more respectful of Amanda's memory in the home she loved." His response caught me off guard. "I need to move on with my life, King. Amanda would want that for me. She would not want me sitting around this old house moping." Old house. The dismissive way he referred to the home I had built, the home Amanda had grown up in and loved, felt like a slap in the face. A few days later, I came home from grocery shopping to find several large garbage bags by the front door. Peering inside one, I was shocked to discover they contained Amanda's clothes and personal items. "What are these?" I asked Walter when he came downstairs. "I am donating them to Goodwill," he replied casually. "No point in keeping all this stuff around. It just makes it harder to move forward." It had been barely 1 month since we buried my daughter, and already her husband was erasing her presence from our home. That night, unable to sleep, I checked Walter's phone that he had left charging in the kitchen. What I found broke my heart all over again. He had already created profiles on several dating apps, describing himself as a recently single professional looking for companionship. There was no mention of Amanda, no acknowledgement of his loss or grief. The next morning, I attempted to talk to Walter about the house and our living arrangement going forward. "This house has always been in my name," I explained. "I have never added anyone else to the deed, not even Amanda. But I always intended for it to be her inheritance, and I want to be clear about expectations now." Walter's expression changed, his usually charming smile replaced by something colder. "Actually, King, Amanda and I discussed this before she passed. She wanted me to have the house. She told me when you were not there." This struck me as completely unlike my daughter, who knew how much the house meant to me and our family history. But in my grief-fogged state, I began to question my own understanding. Had she said something I did not remember? Was I being unreasonable? Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Old friends from my construction days who stopped by to check on me were treated with such coldness by Walter that they eventually stopped coming. The photos of Amanda that had adorned our living room walls slowly disappeared, replaced by generic artwork Walter brought home. When I asked about the missing photos, he claimed he was redecorating for a fresh start. I retreated more and more to my bedroom, feeling like a stranger in the home I had built with my own hands. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake listening to Walter and his friends downstairs, their laughter a jarring contrast to the grief that consumed me. One evening, I overheard Walter on the phone, saying he was stuck living with the old man but working on a solution. The solution, it seemed, involved subtle but persistent suggestions that I should consider my options for the future. "Have you thought about those senior communities they are building across town?" He would ask casually over breakfast. "They have activities, people your own age. Might be good for you to get a fresh start somewhere new." Each suggestion felt like another piece of my world being chipped away. This was my home, filled with 40 years of memories, the only connection I had left to both Sophia and Amanda. The thought of leaving was unbearable, yet I began to feel increasingly unwelcome in the space I had created. 3 months after Amanda's death, I returned home from a doctor's appointment to find a young woman I had never seen before, sitting on our living room sofa. Walter introduced her as Tanya, carefully avoiding any label for their relationship, but the body language between them spoke volumes. They were sitting in the reading nook by the bay window, Amanda's favorite spot in the whole house, where she had spent countless hours during her illness watching the birds in the garden. The sight of this stranger in my daughter's special place, with Walter's arm casually draped around her shoulders, hit me like a physical blow. I retreated to my room without a word, unable to process this new betrayal. Later that evening, Walter knocked on my door. "I need to talk to you about Tanya," he said, his tone falsely conciliatory. "I know it might seem soon to you, but grief affects everyone differently. I need companionship right now, and I think Amanda would understand that. She would want me to be happy." I wanted to scream that Amanda, my beautiful, loving daughter, had been gone for only 3 months, that the bed they were likely sharing still held the impression of her body. Instead, I simply nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue. Over the next few days, Tanya became a regular presence in our home. One evening, as I was about to enter the kitchen, I overheard them talking in low voices. "This place is so outdated," Tanya was saying, "but the lot size is good. You could get a decent price and get that downtown condo you were talking about." "That is the plan," Walter replied. "But I need to figure out what to do about the old man first. He thinks this place is still his." I froze in the hallway, heart pounding. When I went into my bedroom, I noticed my door no longer closed properly, as if someone had been going through my things. The next morning, I found a business card for a real estate agent on the kitchen counter. When I confronted Walter about it, he initially denied any plans to sell the house, then changed tactics when I mentioned overhearing his conversation. "Look, King, we need to be realistic here," he said, dropping all pretense of warmth. "This house is half mine through my marriage to Amanda. I have rights here, and I am thinking about my future. This house has never been in anyone's name but mine," I countered, voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "I have the mortgage papers to prove it." Walter smirked. "Those are outdated. Things changed when I married Amanda. You should talk to a lawyer if you do not believe me, though good luck affording one on your pension." After that confrontation, the situation deteriorated rapidly. I noticed the water pressure in my bathroom suddenly dropped to a trickle. When I asked Walter about it, he claimed there must be plumbing issues in that part of the house. Yet the guest bathroom Tanya used worked perfectly fine. My neighbor Frank, who had known me since I first built the house, witnessed Walter berating me in the front yard when I asked about mail that had gone missing. "You are becoming senile," Walter shouted, loud enough for anyone passing by to hear. "You probably misplaced it like you misplace everything else these days." Frank approached me later when Walter was gone. "Everything okay over there, King?" That did not look right to me. I was too embarrassed to admit what was happening, so I brushed it off as a minor disagreement. But Frank's concerned expression told me he was not convinced. Walter changed the locks on the home office that had once been Sophia's, and later converted for him and Amanda. He moved my tools from the garage workbench where they had been organized for decades, piling them haphazardly in a corner to make room for his expensive mountain bike and golf clubs. My arthritis, which had been manageable for years, flared painfully after Walter claimed the master bedroom with its newer mattress, forcing me to sleep on the 30-year-old spare bed with broken springs. One Saturday morning, I discovered Walter had thrown away Sophia's gardening tools that I had carefully preserved in the shed. When I confronted him, voice breaking at the loss of these precious connections to my late wife, he shrugged. They were rusting and cluttering up the yard. This place needs to look good if we are going to sell it. I also began to notice evidence that someone had been going through my personal documents. Files in my small desk were rearranged, and my social security card briefly went missing before reappearing in a different drawer. Mail continued to disappear, including my pension checks, forcing me to request direct deposit at the bank. Walter's friends, who now regularly filled my home with noise and disrespect, referred to the house as Walter's place during their visits. When I overheard one asking about the old guy who lives here, Walter replied, "Just my late wife's father. Temporary situation until I figure things out." Temporary. In the home I had built with my own hands 40 years ago. When I tried to call Thomas Green, an attorney who had helped with Sophia's will years ago, I discovered my phone service had been cut off. Walter claimed it was an economizing measure, since everyone uses cell phones now anyway. When I pointed out that I did not own a cell phone, he suggested I was too old to adapt to modern technology anyway. The final straw came when Walter announced he would be upgrading the landscaping by removing the maple trees I had preserved when building the house, trees under which Amanda had played as a child. "This is still my house," I said firmly. "Those trees stay." Walter's face hardened. "I am the man of the house now, King. All decisions go through me. You should be grateful I have let you stay this long." That night, my blood pressure spiked so severely, I considered calling an ambulance, but feared the medical bills would further deplete my dwindling resources. As I sat in the dark, taking deep breaths and trying to calm myself, I realized I was genuinely afraid for my health and safety in my own home. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon in January, I returned from a follow-up appointment for my blood pressure to find something unusual. My bedroom door was locked from the inside. Confused, I knocked, thinking perhaps Walter or Tanya had gone in for some reason and accidentally locked it. No answer. From the living room came the sound of voices. I walked down the hallway to find Walter sitting with a woman in a business suit who was reviewing documents spread across the coffee table. Beside them sat a digital camera and what looked like paint samples. "Hardwood floors throughout," Walter was saying. "We can have the carpets removed before listing." "Walter," I interrupted, "why is my bedroom door locked?" The woman looked up in surprise. Walter's expression shifted from startled to irritated. "King, this is Janet from Portland Premier Properties," he said tightly. "We are discussing some home improvements before putting the house on the market next month." "This house is not for sale," I stated firmly, looking directly at Janet. "I am the owner, and I have not authorized any listing." Janet glanced uncertainly between us. Walter laughed, but there was no humor in it. "King is confused about the ownership situation," he told her smoothly. "After my wife passed, the property transferred to me as her spouse. I have the paperwork right here." He pulled out a folder and showed Janet several official-looking documents. From where I stood, I could see Amanda's signature at the bottom of one page. But something about it looked wrong. The loops of her handwriting too perfect, too practiced. "That is not Amanda's signature," I said, moving closer. "And I never transferred this house to anyone." Walter stood abruptly, blocking my view of the papers. "Janet, would you excuse us for a moment? My father-in-law is having one of his episodes. His doctor is considering memory care options." Janet gathered her things quickly, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should reschedule when things are more settled," she suggested, hurrying toward the door. As soon as she left, Walter turned on me, face contorted with rage. "You senile old fool. You just cost me a prime listing with the best agent in Portland. This is my house, I repeated, standing my ground, despite my pounding heart. I built it with my own hands. My name is on the deed and the mortgage. You have no right to sell it. Your name was on the deed, Walter sneered. I filed the paperwork transferring partial ownership after Amanda and I married. And now that she is gone, her share comes to me. It is all legal and filed with the county. That is impossible, I said, though a cold fear was spreading through me. Amanda would never do that without telling me. She did not want to upset you, Walter said, his voice dripping with false concern. She knew how sentimental you are about this outdated dump, but she signed everything. And now that she is gone, we are going to sell it and split the proceeds. Though your share will probably need to go toward your care facility costs. I felt dizzy with shock and betrayal. Could Amanda really have done this? No, I refused to believe it. This was not just about a house. This was about the home that contained every memory of my life with Sophia and Amanda. I want to see those papers, I demanded. And I am calling Thomas Green tomorrow to verify everything. Walter's expression changed, a flash of something like panic, quickly masked by anger. You will do no such thing. In fact, it is time we cleared the air completely. Your constant interference and emotional manipulation have gone on long enough. He strode past me toward my bedroom. I heard a key turn in the lock, and he pushed the door open. Inside, I was shocked to see all my clothes and personal belongings stuffed into garbage bags. What have you done? I gasped. What I should have done months ago, Walter replied coldly. You are leaving today. Now. This is my house, I protested, voice rising. You cannot throw me out of my own home. Watch me, Walter snarled, grabbing one of the garbage bags and dragging it toward the front door. I have already spoken to my attorney. You have been living here on my goodwill, and that goodwill is exhausted. I tried to stop him, grabbing at the bag, but he shoved me hard. At 68, with my arthritis and heart condition, I was no match for a man half my age. I stumbled backward, losing my balance and falling heavily against the wall. Pain shot through my hip as I crumpled to the floor. Walter ignored my fall, continuing to drag bags to the front door. One by one, he threw them out onto the wet sidewalk in the pouring rain. I managed to pull myself up using the hall table for support, limping after him. Walter, please, I begged. All pride forgotten. This is everything I have. Where am I supposed to go? He turned to me, and I scarcely recognized the man my daughter had married. His face was twisted with contempt and something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction. You useless old man, he spat, shoving the last bag out into the rain. Now go live with the beggars. The neighbors across the street had come to their windows, witnessing my humiliation. I had known these people for decades, had watched their children grow up, had helped them with home repairs and landscaping advice. Now they watched as I was thrown out of my own home like garbage. Please. I tried once more, my voice breaking. At least let me stay in the garage until I figure something out. It is pouring rain, and my truck has a broken window seal. Not my problem, Walter said dismissively. You have 1 hour to get your trash and yourself off my property, or I am calling the police to report you for trespassing. With that, he slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing in the rain beside the scattered garbage bags containing the remnants of my life. In a daze, I gathered what I could and loaded it into my 12-year-old truck. The pain in my hip made every movement agony, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I had lost my wife, my daughter, and now my home, all to circumstances beyond my control. That night I slept in the cramped cab of my truck 3 blocks away, unable to fully extend my arthritic legs as rain leaked through the passenger side window seal and soaked my shoulder. By morning I was feverish and struggling to breathe, the beginnings of pneumonia settling into my lungs. I drove back to the house, hoping Walter might have calmed down overnight, might have realized the cruelty of his actions. But when I pulled up, I discovered he had already changed all the locks and the garage door code. Through the living room window, I could see him and Tanya laughing together on the sofa where Amanda had spent her final weeks. Sitting in my truck, soaking wet, feverish, and utterly alone, I reached the darkest moment of my life. I had failed to protect the home I promised Sophia would stay in our family. I had lost every physical connection to my daughter and wife. For a brief, terrible moment, I considered ending it all, driving my truck into the Columbia River and letting the current take me to wherever Sophia and Amanda waited. Then, as I was about to drive away, I noticed something in one of the garbage bags I had hastily thrown into the truck bed. Rain had soaked through the plastic, and I could see a photograph floating in a puddle that had formed. I reached back and carefully extracted it, a family portrait taken when Amanda was 16, just before Sophia got sick. The three of us, smiling on the front porch of our home, Sophia's garden roses blooming around us. The photograph was ruined, colors bleeding into one another, our faces distorted by water damage. Something inside me shattered completely. Later that day, I discovered Walter had accessed the joint account I had shared with Amanda and emptied it completely, taking the last $4,000 I had to my name. With no home, no money, and deteriorating health, I had truly lost everything. I had been parked on a side street, about half a mile from my house for 2 days, alternating between feverish sleep and bouts of coughing that left me gasping for breath. I had not eaten since Walter threw me out, having only a few dollars in my wallet and too proud to use them for food, rather than gas to keep the truck running for heat. A knock on my window startled me awake. Through bleary eyes, I saw Frank Jensen, my neighbor from 2 doors down, peering in with concern. "King? Good Lord, man. I have been looking all over for you," he said when I rolled down the window. Maria and I saw what happened. We tried to come over right away, but that son of a gun, Walter, threatened to call the police if we set foot on the property. I tried to respond, but a coughing fit seized me. Frank's expression grew alarmed. "You are coming home with me right now," he said firmly. "No arguments. I cannot impose," I managed to wheeze. "I will figure something out." Frank shook his head. "My father was a construction worker too, King. He taught me never to turn my back on a neighbor in need. Now start this truck and follow me home, or I will drive it myself." Too weak and sick to argue further, I complied. Frank lived with his wife Maria in a modest rancher they had bought 20 years ago. When they first moved to the neighborhood, I had helped them replace their roof after a severe storm damaged it in 2010. Now they led me into their warm kitchen, Maria immediately brewing tea while Frank insisted I sit down. "You need a doctor," Maria declared, placing her hand on my forehead. "You are burning up." I shook my head. "No insurance, since I turned 65. Medicare only covers so much." "My cousin is a nurse practitioner at the community clinic," Maria said, already reaching for her phone. "She owes me a favor. She will see you today." I wanted to protest, but lacked the strength. Within hours, I was diagnosed with pneumonia and prescribed antibiotics. Maria insisted I take their spare bedroom until you are back on your feet. In my weakened state, I finally accepted their generosity. As I recovered over the next few days, Maria helped me salvage what we could from the garbage bags Walter had thrown out. Most of my clothes were salvageable after washing, but many photographs and documents had been damaged by rain. Maria carefully spread them to dry on their dining room table, treating each water-stained memory with reverence. "Look at this, King," she said on the 3rd day, holding up a plastic folder that had protected its contents from the worst of the water damage. "Is this important?" It was the warranty deed to my house, the original document from 1978 when I first purchased the property, and there, clear as day, was my name alone as the owner. I had never added Sophia to the deed, something we had planned to do but never got around to before her unexpected death, and I had certainly never added Amanda or Walter. "This proves the house is mine," I said, hope stirring for the first time in days. Walter lied about Amanda transferring ownership. Frank studied the document. "This is a good start, but we need proper legal advice." My nephew Jackson passed the bar last year. He is working at Westbrook and Associates downtown. Let me give him a call. Jackson Perez arrived that evening after work, a serious young man in his early 30s, carrying a leather briefcase that looked too expensive for a first-year associate. He reminded me of Amanda, with his earnest expression and careful attention, as I explained everything that had happened. "May I see that warranty deed?" he asked. After examining it carefully, he looked up. "This is definitely the original deed, showing you as the sole owner. Did you ever file any paperwork transferring any portion of ownership to Amanda or Walter?" "Never," I said firmly. "I always intended the house to go to Amanda after I passed, but I never formally changed the deed." Jackson made some notes. "And did Amanda leave a will?" "Yes," I said, the memory suddenly returning through my grief fog. "We did it together after her diagnosis. It is in my safety deposit box downtown." "Then Walter has no legal claim to your house," Jackson stated flatly. "Even if Amanda had somehow been added to the deed, which she was not, her will would determine where her share went after her death, not automatic transfer to Walter. And if your name is the only one on the deed, as this suggests, then Walter has absolutely no grounds to claim ownership or to evict you." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. But he changed the locks. He threw me out. He is probably selling my things as we speak. "What he did was illegal," Jackson assured me. "It is called self-help eviction, and it is against the law in Oregon. Only a sheriff can evict someone, and only after court proceedings. Walter had no legal right to change the locks or remove you from your home. With Jackson's help, we developed a plan. First, he would secure an emergency restraining order against Walter based on elder abuse and illegal eviction. Then, we would retrieve Amanda's will from my safety deposit box to confirm her intentions. Finally, we would file for an emergency hearing to restore my possession of the house. As I continued to recover physically, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Frank helped me contact a private investigator friend who discovered Walter had been married before Amanda to a woman in Seattle. That marriage had ended under similar circumstances, with Walter attempting to claim property that belonged to his former in-laws after their daughter passed away from illness. Even more disturbing, the investigator uncovered evidence that Walter had significant gambling debts to online casinos, explaining his desperate need to sell my house quickly. He had apparently been counting on using Amanda's supposed inheritance of my property to solve his financial problems. Perhaps most shocking was when Jackson received a call from a woman named Dorothy Bennett from Eugene. She had seen a social media post Jackson had made, seeking information about Walter Lewis, and recognized the name immediately. "Dorothy is Walter's former mother-in-law," Jackson explained after speaking with her. "Her daughter Heather was Walter's first wife. She died of lupus 4 years ago, and Walter tried to claim ownership of their family cabin on the pretext that Heather had wanted him to have it. The only difference is that Dorothy had clear documentation and stopped him legally before he could take physical possession." Armed with this information, Jackson expanded our legal strategy. Not only would we fight to regain my home, but we would also pursue criminal charges against Walter for document forgery, fraud, and elder abuse. Frank rallied several of my old construction buddies, men I had worked alongside for decades who came to Maria and Frank's house to offer support. Some brought food, others offered temporary housing, and a few even volunteered to confront Walter directly, though Jackson quickly discouraged that approach. "We need to do this legally," he insisted. "Anything else could backfire and harm our case." A nurse who had worked with Amanda at the hospital organized a fundraiser for my legal expenses, sharing the story of how I had spent my retirement savings on Amanda's treatments. The response from the hospital staff was overwhelming, with donations pouring in alongside messages of how much they had loved and respected my daughter. For the first time since Amanda's death, I felt something beyond grief. I felt purpose. This fight was not just for me, but for Amanda's memory and the promises I had made to both her and Sophia. The home we had shared contained more than just possessions. It held our family history, our love, our very identity. "We are going to get your house back," Jackson promised me. his determination matching my own. And Walter is going to face consequences for what he has done. 2 weeks after Walter had thrown me onto the street, Jackson informed me that all our legal preparations were complete. The emergency restraining order had been granted, preventing Walter from selling the house or removing any more of my belongings. Jackson had also discovered that Walter had already attempted to list the property with 3 different real estate agencies, though our legal hold had prevented any from moving forward. "Today is the day," Jackson said, his young face serious but confident as we sat in his office downtown. "The sheriff will meet us at the house at 2 o'clock to serve Walter with the court orders and oversee your lawful return to your property." I nodded, my stomach churning with anxiety and anticipation. Frank had insisted on coming along for moral support, and Maria had pressed a thermos of hot coffee into my hands before we left, telling me I would need my strength. At precisely 2 o'clock, our small convoy pulled up in front of my house. Sheriff Deputy Rodriguez, a stocky woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the court documents one final time before leading our group to the front door. Jackson stood beside me, with Frank a reassuring presence just behind. Deputy Rodriguez knocked firmly. "Sheriff's Department, open the door, please." After a long moment, the door opened to reveal Walter, his expression shifting from annoyed to shocked as he took in the official presence on his doorstep. "Walter Levis?" Deputy Rodriguez asked. "Yes," Walter replied cautiously. "What is this about?" "I have several legal documents to serve you with," she stated professionally, handing him a thick envelope. "This includes an emergency restraining order, a cease and desist regarding any attempts to sell this property, and a court order restoring Mr. King Williams to his rightful residence." Walter's face drained of color as he glanced at the papers, then at me standing behind the deputy. "There must be some mistake," he stammered. "This is my house. My wife inherited it." "That is false," Jackson interjected smoothly. "The warranty deed clearly shows Mr. Williams as the sole owner. We also have Mrs. Amanda Lewis's actual will, which makes no mention of transferring the property to you. The documents you have been showing to real estate agents appear to be forgeries, which is a criminal offense in the state of Oregon." Walter stepped backward, as if physically pushed by Jackson's words. "You cannot just barge in here," he protested. "I have rights." "Actually, sir, this court order authorizes us to enter the premises and restore Mr. Williams to his lawful residence," Deputy Rodriguez explained. "I need to ask you to step aside." For a moment, Walter looked like he might refuse, but the deputy's hand moving slightly toward her belt made him reconsider. He stepped back, allowing us to enter. The sight that greeted me made my heart sink. In just 2 weeks, Walter had transformed my home. Many of my furniture pieces were gone, replaced by modern items I did not recognize. The walls had been painted a stark white, covering the warm beige Sophia had chosen years ago. Family photos had been removed, and several moving boxes stood stacked in the corner. "Where are my things?" I asked, looking around at the unfamiliar space that had once been my sanctuary. Walter did not answer, but a voice came from the kitchen doorway. "He sold a lot of it." Tanya stood there, looking uncomfortable. "The furniture, the old record collection, some tools. He said it was all junk anyway." Walter shot her a venomous look. "Shut up, Tanya." Deputy Rodriguez made a note in her book. "Selling property that does not belong to you is theft, Mr. Lewis. We will need a full accounting of everything that has been removed from the premises." As we moved through the house, the extent of Walter's violations became clear. He had emptied Sophia's hope chest that had contained her wedding dress and family heirlooms. He had removed the handcrafted bedroom set I had made for Amanda when she turned 13. The garage had been cleared of my professional-grade tools, likely sold for a fraction of their value. He was planning to leave the country, Tanya suddenly blurted, ignoring Walter's attempt to silence her. He booked tickets to Costa Rica for next week. Said once the house sold, we would never have to work again. Jackson exchanged glances with Deputy Rodriguez, who immediately got on her radio to request backup. "Mr. Lewis, I need you to remain here while we sort this out, she said firmly. Walter's composure finally cracked. This is ridiculous. That old man is confused. Amanda wanted me to have this place. She told me so. Then perhaps you can explain these, Jackson said, removing documents from his briefcase. This is Amanda Lewis's actual will, retrieved from Mr. Williams's safety deposit box yesterday. It specifically states that while her personal effects should go to you, the house was to remain her father's until his death, at which point it would go to charity. He laid another document on the table. And this is the warranty deed showing King Williams as the sole owner of this property since 1978. Walter's eyes darted frantically between the documents and the door, as if calculating his chances of escape. Before he could move, 2 additional sheriff's deputies arrived. We found this in the master bedroom closet, one of them said, holding up a folder. Appears to be blank deed transfer forms and practice copies of signature attempts. Walter lunged for the folder, but was quickly restrained by the deputies. "Those are private," he shouted. Jackson carefully examined the contents of the folder. "These appear to be practice attempts at forging Amanda Lewis's signature," he noted, showing them to Deputy Rodriguez. "And here are copies of documents filed with the county claiming transfer of property ownership with what appears to be a forged signature." The evidence was damning. As the deputies handcuffed Walter, he made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "King abused Amanda," he shouted wildly. "He was controlling and manipulative. She wanted to get away from him. I was just helping her escape his toxic influence." Frank stepped forward, face flushed with anger. "That is absolute garbage. King was the most devoted father I have ever seen. He spent every penny he had trying to save Amanda. We all witnessed it. We have statements from 15 of Amanda's co-workers at the hospital attesting to Mr. Williams's devotion and care during her illness," Jackson added. "Plus, we found this." He held up a small camera that had been hidden behind a book on the living room shelf. "This appears to be a recording device, placed to monitor Mr. Williams' movements and conversations when he was still living here. Based on the storage dates, it was installed shortly after Amanda's funeral." Walter sagged in the deputy's grip, finally realizing the depth of trouble he was in. "I want a lawyer," he muttered. "You will need one," Deputy Rodriguez replied. "Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, grand theft, and illegal eviction are just the start of the charges you are facing." As Walter was led away, I stood in the center of my altered living room, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief at reclaiming my home, warred with grief at seeing how much had been lost and changed in such a short time. "We will get a locksmith here immediately," Jackson assured me, "and we will file for emergency injunctions to try to recover any of your property that Walter sold." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. A locksmith changed every lock in the house. Frank and several other neighbors helped me begin the process of reclaiming my space, moving in the few possessions I had managed to save. Maria arrived with food and cleaning supplies, declaring war on the bachelor mess Walter and his friends had created. As daylight faded, we made a surprising discovery in the attic crawl space. Hidden under old insulation were several boxes containing many of the family photographs I thought had been destroyed or sold. Walter had apparently hidden them rather than disposed of them, perhaps planning to look for valuable items more thoroughly before leaving the country. Among the recovered items was a photo album Sophia had created chronicling the building of our home, from the empty lot to the finished structure. Seeing her handwriting labeling each photo, King laying the foundation, King and Joe framing the second floor, brought tears to my eyes, but also a sense of rightful return. This house was truly mine, built with my own hands, filled with 4 decades of memories. That night, sleeping in my own bed for the first time in weeks, I felt both victorious and deeply sad. Walter's bail had been denied due to flight risk, and he faced serious criminal charges. The legal process to recover my stolen possessions was underway. I had my home back, yet the house felt emptier than ever without Amanda. The traumatic events had reopened the raw wound of her loss, making it feel fresh again. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered if this house would ever feel like a true home again without my family to share it with. 6 months passed. Spring had given way to summer, and the Japanese maple trees in my front yard that Walter had threatened to remove now displayed their vibrant red leaves in full glory. The house had slowly transformed back into a space of comfort rather than trauma. Walter had pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud and elder abuse in exchange for a reduced sentence of 5 years. The investigation had uncovered an extensive pattern of similar behavior with his previous wife's family and evidence of gambling addiction that had driven his desperate actions. None of that excused what he had done, but understanding the full picture provided some closure. Through Jackson's legal efforts, I had recovered about 60% of my stolen possessions. Some items were gone forever, sold to unwitting buyers who had legal rights to their purchases. But the most meaningful items, including Sophia's hope chest and my handmade furniture, had been returned. The financial restitution Walter was ordered to pay would take years to fulfill, but that mattered less to me than reclaiming my home and dignity. In Amanda's memory, I had established a small scholarship fund for nursing students at Portland Community College, using some of the insurance money that had finally come through. The first recipient was a single mother who wanted to work in oncology nursing, just as Amanda had. Presenting the scholarship at the college's awards ceremony had been both painful and healing, a way to ensure my daughter's compassionate spirit lived on. My neighbors, whose support had been my salvation in the darkest days, remained a constant presence in my life. Frank and Maria insisted I join them for dinner every Sunday, a tradition that expanded to include other neighbors and friends. What began as their generosity toward a man in need evolved into a genuine community, filling my life with conversation and connection when I needed it most. At Frank's suggestion, I began speaking at the local senior center about elder rights and legal protections. My story, unfortunately, was not unique, and sharing my experience helped others recognize warning signs of potential abuse or fraud. Jackson occasionally joined me, offering free legal advice to seniors concerned about their own situations. The house itself had been repainted, inside and out, erasing Walter's cold modernization and returning it to the warm, welcoming space it had been. I did not try to recreate exactly what had been before, recognizing that some changes were necessary to move forward. Amanda's bedroom, which I had preserved untouched after she moved out and then reclaimed after her death, was eventually transformed into a small library and community gathering space where neighbors could borrow books or join me for coffee. One of the most unexpected joys came 3 months after reclaiming my home, when the local animal shelter called. They had a 7-year-old orange tabby cat that had been surrendered by a neighbor of Walter's girlfriend, Tanya. The cat's microchip identified it as belonging to Amanda Lewis. Apparently, after throwing me out, Walter had abandoned Amanda's beloved cat Rusty at Tanya's place, and when their relationship ended, the cat was surrendered to the shelter. Reuniting with Rusty felt like recovering a living piece of Amanda. The cat remembered me instantly, climbing onto my lap and purring loudly the moment we were reunited. Having him padding around the house, sleeping in patches of sunlight, and curling up on my bed at night provided a comfort I had not known I needed. In the backyard, I planted a memorial garden filled with Amanda's favorite flowers, black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, and daisies surrounding a small stone bench where I often sat in the evenings. Sophia had always been the gardener in our family, but tending these plants connected me to both of the women I had lost, creating beauty from grief. Throughout this journey, I learned lessons I never expected to face in my late 60s. I learned about the critical importance of proper legal documentation, now making sure all my affairs were in order with Jackson's help. I learned that community could form family when blood relations were gone. Most importantly, I learned that resilience does not mean forgetting or moving on from loss, but rather finding ways to honor what was lost while still embracing what remains. Every Tuesday afternoon, I volunteered at Portland Memorial Hospital, sitting with cancer patients who had no family visitors, something Amanda had often done during her nursing career. Wheeling my cart of books, puzzles, and simple comforts through the oncology floor where she had once worked, I sometimes caught glimpses of her in the compassionate actions of other nurses. In those moments, The pain of her absence was matched by pride in the legacy she had left. Through the senior center, I met others who had experienced elder abuse or exploitation, forming a support group that met monthly in my living room. Sharing our stories and strategies for recovery created bonds of understanding that proved invaluable to all of us. Many of these new friends had also lost spouses or children, and together we navigated the complex terrain of grief and rebuilding. The legal battle over my home taught me that justice, while imperfect, is worth fighting for. Walter's actions caused tremendous pain and loss, yet his punishment could never truly balance the scales. I eventually reached a place where I no longer wasted energy hating him, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because carrying that hatred only harmed me further. True justice came not from his imprisonment, but from my reclamation of my life and purpose. My home stands now as both a monument to the past and a bridge to the future. The structure my hands built decades ago shelters not just my aging body, but also the community that saved me when I thought all was lost. The walls hold memories of Sophia's laughter, Amanda's childhood footsteps, and now the voices of friends who gather regularly around my dining table. As I sit on my front porch this evening, watching the neighborhood children ride bicycles past my house, I reflect on how differently things might have ended without the intervention of caring neighbors and competent legal help. I think about the vulnerable seniors who face similar situations without such support, and renew my commitment to advocacy and awareness. Have you ever had to stand up for what was rightfully yours, even when the odds seemed stacked against you? Or known someone who faced elder abuse but found the strength to fight back? I hope my story inspires you to look out for the vulnerable people in your own communities. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts or experiences, and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience against injustice. Hit that like button if you believe, as I do, that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity and rebuild your life. Thank you for listening to an old man's journey through loss and recovery. Remember, in our darkest moments, community can be the light that guides us home.